Hi, Professor.
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, Professor.
Hi. Hope you are all doing well and you're all excited about the new lockdown, prepared for, fun staying at home. I was just reading that there's a good chance we could be going through this for at least another year, probably longer.
Please no.
What?
Please no.
Please no. I know. This class. Well, this is one of the minor sacrifices, right? I need vacation. That's what I need. I have got two boys that are supposed to be going off to college for the first time. So this is a crazy world, huh? But 1 year would probably, it sounds like, is optimistic at this point. I've heard up to 3 years, right?
Oh my God.
I know. And even though people focus, everyone always, why, I don't know, everyone in the world is focused on what happens in the United States. In the United States, they might have a vaccine within maybe a year, but for it to get to the rest of the world, it could take another year. And how is Lebanon going to pay for it? I have no idea. So we can, I guess, we could just not think about these things. So let me begin by, after all that good news and happy thoughts, let me begin by taking volunteers for participation.
I'd like to volunteer.
Karen has volunteered.
Professor, I would like to volunteer, but if it's okay with you, I have to leave at 1:15 because I have a conference that I need to participate in for a job.
That is all right, Jana. I will be
Thank you.
posting the video of the course so you can see the rest of it. Others?
Okay, thank you.
Professor, did you put my name?
I'd like to volunteer as well.
Who asked if I put their name?
Hello.
Lynn.
Allah was one of them?
Hala and Lynn.
Hala and Lynn. Okay, so far I have Karen, Jana, Hala, and Lynn.
I can volunteer too. Hanin.
Anin. One more?
Me as well, sir.
Me.
Burhan.
Say it again, please.
Burhan. Nurhan.
Yes. Excellent. That's 6. No males. No gender balance here today, huh? Same as my other class. Was that Tiara?
Tiara. Yeah.
Tiara, are you volunteering?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me turn my sound up a little bit. I'm having here. Okay, that's the last one. Abdul, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
You sent me an email saying you didn't get the invitation.
No, I got it, but it was hidden under another email.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't the first one up, so I had to scroll down.
I see. Yeah, sometimes, particularly Gmail or others, can be like that. So it's fine. Abdul sent me an email right before class saying he hadn't received the invitation, and so I resent it to him. But that was just a problem on his side, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
Before we get started, let me say that, so later this week, I'm going to set up the drop boxes. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to send everybody an email with instructions. And the instructions are going to tell you essentially to respond to my email, but not by hitting reply, but by starting a new email and putting your name in that email and your AUB email address in that email. And then sending that to me. And that will make it so easy for me to copy your name to a folder and to invite you, right? So that's what I'll do. And then, so by the end of this week, hopefully I'll have set up all of the Dropbox accounts with you guys. And then you can put your readers in there and I can start looking at your annotations. Hala had her hand up. Do you want to speak?
Professor,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like I'm really behind on what's like on the website. It says that I'm supposed to be on page 33 for Copernicus, and I'm really not there yet. Is that fine, or
Well,
like, should I really be catching up? Before
fine,
the
and it's not fine. It's fine in that today we're probably going to get to like page 12 or 16 or something. So we're not going to get through the second reading today, though we will finish all the readings. I'm very hopeful by Thursday we'll be done with Copernicus.
Oh no, I'm past the second part of the reading. Like I just have till page 33 now.
Yeah,
Is that fine? Like I can finish.
You'll be fine.
To finish that.
In general,
Okay, thank you.
you know, what I said is not fine is that only that, you know, there's going to be a lot more reading and a lot of things we're going to do much faster than Copernicus. So you might want to, we go at this point, we're going extremely slowly. So if this is trouble keeping up with the reading, then that would be a bit of an issue. But no, you have no problems at this point. Any other questions before we dive into the text? Someone want to remind me exactly. Have we gotten to the letter here? Where did we leave off last time? Because I have another section of this class, so I sometimes forget where we were in that text. I should maybe mark it, but. We read through.
Lastly, we talked about Copernicus's view on the hypothesis and what he thought about it.
What hypothesis is? Well, we were talking about this preface by Osiander, correct?
Yes, and then we reached the part where he talks about the astronomer's duty as well.
Okay. So what we saw here was, in short, that Osiander presents this kind of very clearly Aristotelian idea of what the goal or the duty of a philosopher, of an astronomer is, where astronomy fits also within other kinds of thinking, right? Its relationship to philosophy and natural philosophy. A few things that are probably a little bit initially confusing to some of you is that according to the, until about 100 years ago, the term philosophy included science. Right? What we call physics was called natural philosophy. Sir Isaac Newton's great book, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy. That's the title of it. So mathematics, well there, he's within the Copernican tradition. Traditionally, in the Aristotelian theory, as you know, mathematics was not a serious part or an important part of natural science, natural philosophy. And there was this distinction between natural philosophy, which gives real explanations, and astronomy, which is just a branch of mathematics that predicts things. And we've seen here that Osiander, though without saying it's his view, presents that as if that's the view of the book, right? And therefore, you shouldn't worry about what's in this book. In fact, you should be careful not to become more stupid by reading the book. Because if you believe it's about truth, then you will walk away more of an idiot than when you started. So you have to understand what it's about. And we read through some of these. He just says it like 4 times, right? The same thing. He cannot in any way, the astronomer cannot in any way attain the true causes. Here, the astronomer is completely and absolutely ignorant of the causes of the apparent uniform motions. It's not just that the astronomer doesn't succeed, the astronomer doesn't even aim at true causes of things in the universe. What do they truly aim at? Being able to have a model that predicts the placement and the appearances of things in the sky, right? Now we saw here, Osiander does recognize, though, the philosopher, the natural philosopher, right, will perhaps seek something like the truth. But then he expresses a slightly different view, right, from the Aristotelian view, which is, but neither of them will understand anything as certain unless it has been divinely revealed to him, right? So you can take, looking at this preface, you can see that there are three different views one could take about early modern science, right? One could take the view that, as Aristotle believed, early modern mechanical science, mathematical science does name it truth and so on, right? That's one view. But philosophy, natural philosophy does, right? It gains certainty and knowledge about the universe. That's the Aristotelian view. That's one view. Then you could take the modern view that you and I have, which is the extreme opposite, right? Our view is not only that mathematics is useful for science, but only mathematical theory is expressed, or sorry, only scientific theories expressed mathematically are scientific at all, right? We have the extreme opposite view. This idea of being expressible in mathematics is one of the absolutely fundamental ideas, right? And you probably haven't thought about how fundamental that is. You know, if you go into the chemistry lab and you do some experiments, there's all kinds of, or some of you have been to the chem, back when we could go outside. What was the chemistry thing they had? What was that called? The Chem Carnival or whatever, right? Chemists do, you know, it's fun, right? You can make colors, different colors, things expand, things heat up and explode. Many people, that's what they think of chemistry, right? And then if you are a child and you say, well, that's chemistry, and then you study chemistry, sorry for you. There's none of that in chemistry. And the more and the deeper you go into chemistry, the less there is of that. Why? Why is it less exciting?
Because we start studying geometry of structures and the calculus of the equations and, you know.
The mathematics, right?
Yeah.
And you go, well, what about, I like things that turn green, you know? Green, it's my favorite color. I want to do chemistry of green. And they'll say, you can't do that. Green is not a scientific concept. You could do stuff of certain kinds of dyes with a certain kind of structure that just happen to be green, but that's a completely arbitrary thing. Like wavelengths of light are not green or red or blue. They only look that way in your head for some reason, and no one knows why, right? If you want to know what red is, for a physicist, a red is, you know, 960 nanometer electromagnetic wave. And then you say, well, what color is the wave? I say, you don't understand what you're saying. Waves are not colors. They're mathematical objects. They don't have colors. What's the wave made out of? It's not made of anything. It's made of mathematics. What are electrons made out of? Mathematics, right? All you can say about an electron is mathematical properties. It's not made out of brick. It's not yellow. It's not anything, right? So all those things that we call like heat, warmth, even heat. Heat's a good example as well, right? Warmth is not a thing. In science, you have heat and you have kinetic energy and all these mathematically describable things. And any theory you come up with in science, it has to be reducible and expressible completely in mathematics, or else whatever's left over in there is just not scientific. And so we divide all our everyday concepts into two sets, right? There's like the scientific concepts, and then there's the, I don't know, human concepts. Redness, greenness, warmth, flavor, taste, good and bad. These are different kinds of ideas, and they don't seem to have any way of being expressed perfectly scientifically. And they shouldn't be in a scientific theory. That separation of concepts into what are called primary concepts or primary qualities of objects, and secondary, the human ones. This is something that is not part of Aristotle's worldview, is not part of the ancient worldview, and to a certain extent, it wasn't part of Copernicus's worldview, and slowly became the worldview as modern science took over. And it's based upon this idea, right, that reality is mathematical. So the only true theories are mathematical theories. This is the farthest opposite of the Aristotelian view in one respect, right? It's like the Aristotelian view in another way, in a very general way, when you compare it with the third possible position you could take on astronomy. You could take the view of astronomy that it doesn't aim at truth and it cannot have certainty. That sounds Aristotelian, right? But not because it's not natural philosophy, but because it's a product of the human mind. So this view, this is the view, so you could say that the mathematics is key, is the Copernican and post-Copernican view that we have. There's the Aristotelian view, and then there's the view that was defended mainly by the Pope and the core of the church, which is that any product of human reason, so including astronomy, but also natural philosophy, cannot have certainty. Because certainty of science is inconsistent with religion and piety, right? And you see this gestured towards in this last sentence, but neither of them will understand, or state anything certain unless it has been divinely revealed to him, right? Church is the ultimate arbiter of truth. Now, why is that so? Does that seem to you like that would be such a dangerous idea? Science can reach certainty about anything?
I mean, to us, no, but to people whose government was run by the church and their entire lives were revolving around the idea that the Bible had all the truth, it's pretty scary to them.
What exactly should bother them? I mean, the theory is not about, you know, like for instance, you say, I can predict the tides with certainty, given gravitation, the position of the Earth, the position of the moon. You all know that the tides are caused by the moon, right? Actually, Newton was one of the first people to demonstrate this. Galileo worked on the problem before. It's pretty cool, right? The moon pulls on the water on the Earth and makes it slosh around. And you can predict that. And you say, I know with certainty that tomorrow the water is going to rise at a certain time of day, because given that the Earth continues moving in its motion and the moon, because it follows deductively from my theory, right? I'm certain of it. That's the Bible doesn't say anything about the tides, so why should that bother anyone?
Because I don't know. I think it's because we're saying that, saying that something we're so certain of, and we're like human beings, and like we constantly make errors. So I don't know.
Maybe because we're saying that something other than the divine can give us the ultimate truth or knows more about it.
But also when we know something for so long, like this, what we were taught this by important people, it's very difficult to accept new theories that like affect us. Something important, it's not easy to accept.
Yeah, I was trying to make an example. Let me say something and then you can continue. Thanks, Lynn, for your comment as well. I've tried to pick an example where the Bible doesn't really say anything about it, so then there wouldn't really be a conflict, right? That was my point there. Go on. Was it Jana or who was speaking?
No, it was me.
Yes, Hala.
I wanted to say that usually in religion, you're not supposed to question anything beyond like the premise that they give you. So like knowing something that religion does not offer you seems like it's offensive to them, and maybe like back then it's like exaggerated as well. And like in my like religion personally, since I was young, like they tell you don't question, don't question anything else. Like don't question who God is, don't question his power, don't question something that's not mentioned. And that maybe that is it relates to this.
Yeah, I mean, since it's about the tides, it's not really questioning God or anything in there. Again, that's why I chose that thing. You might say you shouldn't be concerned or interested in other things. That sometimes it does go that far. Like,
Yeah, something like that.
don't worry about
Yeah,
it.
it's
You
like
shouldn't be
that.
worrying
That's
about
what I mean.
who cares about the tides. You need to be going to church, right?
Mhm.
Not so much. I mean, in that time, the church was mainly, people didn't really participate in the church. The church, I mean, maybe the most they participated was paying money for different things, right? Like you had to, especially during this period, there was a lot of, the Catholic Church was, you like to get your, you say one of your parents or uncles or someone dies, they would go to purgatory, right? This is according to the Catholic Church. Catholic Church still believes in purgatory, teaches kids that there's this middle place people go and get stuck, kind of, right? They don't get to go to heaven. And the only way out of purgatory is, since they're already in purgatory, they can't do anything to get out. The only way they can get out of purgatory is if their family helps them get out. And so they had this idea, but of course in the medieval period, individuals had no ability to do anything. Only priests had the right to pray, which is odd to us, yes? But so you had to pay a priest to pray for your loved ones to get them out of purgatory. This is how, for instance, St. Peter's was built. They collected money from these kinds of things. And this is also what pissed off a lot of people, particularly people living in Germany and others, and made Protestantism so attractive. Because if you're a Protestant, you don't have to pay for all this stuff. You can do it yourself, right? It's like do-it-yourself religion. It's a cheap option. You can pray, you can be saved, you can do all these things. You don't need the priests at all, right? So people didn't really participate so much. So it wasn't so much that they wanted people to be dominated by it. That's just an aside. Think about it this way. It's about control over nature, control over things. If I say I am certain that tomorrow the moon is going to move in a certain way which will cause the tides to rise, I am saying that God has to do something. And God has to do it for certain reasons and in a certain way, right? God can't just make the tides. God is making the tides because of the moon and the earth and their motions and gravitation. And God doesn't have the freedom to just not have the tides, right? Otherwise I couldn't be certain. If I were to say, yeah, there's this theory I have, but God could make the moon burst into flames tomorrow at any time, and he could make the tides go down when the moon and the earth are in the same positions, then basically I'm saying there is no theory. There is no certainty. But if I say the opposite, then I'm saying God has to act in certain ways. I know what those ways are. And God isn't free to do anything he likes. The church is rather, their position is, this is just human vanity. This is belief in that the human mind is in a way more powerful than God, right? Now you say, but it's God still doing it. Yes, but you're putting limitations on God through your science. You're saying he has to work in certain ways. But God's the great mystery, the great all-powerful being, right? So he could do whatever he wants. God could make the earth and the moon move as they are and make the tides rise, and make the tides rise for no reason, right? Not because the moon is moving in that way, or the earth is moving that way, or not because of gravitation. You can make all those things true and make the tides rise just to have fun with you, right? So that you believe there's a theory that's true. God can do whatever he wants at any moment. So keep that in mind, you scientists and natural philosophers. Not just that astronomy and mathematics are not the way to reach truth. Human reason is not the way to reach truth. You can have no truth. You just should be thankful. If the sun rises tomorrow and your crops grow, thank God. Because that's the only thing. Don't thank your science. Don't thank the sun. Thank God. Because God could make the sun freeze your crops if he wanted to. So do anything he wanted. That you are comfortable right now sitting in your chair, not being tortured. All thanks, right? Because you don't deserve it. That's the other thing that the church always held, right? Human beings don't deserve God's goodness. We should only be thankful for it. So even that, you can't say, well, I've been a good person, so God shouldn't make me burst into flames arbitrarily. He should keep me more or less at a cool temperature. No, you don't deserve that, right? God could do whatever he wants. Be quiet. That's the position of the church, one of absolute authority. And the reason you can see why this is a historical back and forth between natural philosophy comes from Aristotle, right? And the church absorbed that. But Aristotle had certain views that the church did not accept. Like in Aristotle's natural philosophy, he has a proof that the universe is eternal. Well, that's a problem because the Christian church believes in creation and the earth is only so many thousand years old. So human reason must have been in error there. Despite its proofs, its certainty of Aristotle, it was utterly wrong. And so it had to have it revealed, the truth, right? So these are the three views. These are the three views. Now, going back, either of the two views, if you hold the Pope's view, then you meet a Copernicus, you meet a Galileo, there's no way they can persuade you that science is true, right? That it's certain. There's no way they can persuade you. There's no common ground, right? The Copernicus can come to you and say, look at all my data. Look at all my data. It's so beautiful. It works. My model predicts and everything. He could do that and go to the Aristotelians or to the church, either of people holding those views, and he has no argument whatsoever, right? No ground to work from. This shows that the truth of modern science is not something modern science can prove. This even tells us today, right? We assume science works and tells us the truth. But science can't prove its own truth. It can only say, if you accept our way of reaching truth, then I can prove X is true or Y is true. But if you reject the whole idea, there's no common ground for us. I can't persuade you, right? No one has ever proven the Pope was wrong, right? Everything that has happened since is still consistent with God just being nice to us, right? Except not bursting into flames, and tides is now your iPhone working every day, and so on. He's just making it all look like it happens. There were philosophers, serious philosophers in the modern period that defended this view. That God's absolute. So this was an attack on even on Newtonian science. These were philosophers, a guy named George Berkeley, for instance, if you take a modern philosophy class, he believes the laws of nature don't in any way, they're just kind of like rules that explain how God is kind of kind to us by acting in a predictable way. They aren't anything that makes anything happen. No one's ever disproven that. But we move on, right? So it is with science. This tells you why in this period, the early modern science is so closely connected with metaphysics and the basis of philosophy. Because the only way you persuade the Aristotelian you have some ability to persuade, not by presenting your data and your models and showing how they work, but if you can show them their philosophy is wrong. If you can show them their distinction between astronomy and natural philosophy is wrong, then you can persuade them because they still admit the ability of the human mind to reach truth. And so, for instance, we'll see Copernicus later. He started off as just a pure physicist in the modern period, mathematical physicist. But when he saw the condemnation of Galileo and he saw the depth of the problem, he for the first time decided to go back to that area that he didn't like called philosophy, right? metaphysics. And he wrote these immensely powerful, influential books that some of you have heard about and read, Meditations on First Philosophy, this whole I think, therefore I am, all these things you heard about, his proofs of God's existence, the immortality of the soul. As we'll see, those are all strategies, as he told one of his friends once in a letter, that are supposed to be parts of the foundation of his physics, right? This is kind of to change the conception of truth by changing conceptions of God, man's relationship to the God, the human mind, and so on. And to sell to the church this idea. He tried even to sell it to the church. So though he could maybe persuade Aristotelians, the only way to persuade the church is by saying, well, maybe you're a little short-sighted, church. Maybe your view isn't quite the best one. Maybe you want a philosophy that proves the most important religious truths as well. Guess what? My theory proves a creator God. My theory, the foundation of my mathematical theory also proves the immortality of the soul. Look, it's really good for religion too, right? So you can maybe persuade some in the religious area. There were some hands up. Hala, you had your hand up?
Yeah, Professor, it was just, you were saying something about the three views, and then you said the Pope view, and then I kind of lost what would be the...
So the three views. There's our view, which is partially the view of Copernicus. Mathematics is the only way. There's the Aristotelian view. The mind can still reach certainty, but astronomy's method and purpose is not the kind of thing that reaches certainty because of its reliance on mathematics. Or both mathematics and philosophy, indeed human reason itself, cannot reach any certainty.
Okay, thank
Those
you.
are the
I'm
three
sorry.
different views. Yeah, sure. Another hand up. Speak. I keep getting a sign that says two people had their hands up. Yes, Mohammed, you want to speak?
Yes, please. I have a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it would be good if you could turn up your sound a little bit.
So,
Yeah. Go ahead.
okay. So my question was, who was trying to convince the church with the existence of God? Because so there were two views, and I think the church wanted to keep their view because they wanted to keep their power. But who came in and wanted to prove the existence of God and immortality?
Oh, so I was kind of making a gesture towards some future readings. We're going to read René Descartes, a French philosopher, who part of his strategy with converting European intellectuals to the new mathematical physics was to show that.
So it was.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it was not Aristotle. He just kept his solid view on the church.
Yeah. The Aristotelians.
Okay.
You notice the Aristotelians are not perfectly in alignment
Gave up on
with
human reasoning.
Yeah. The vanity of human reason they still slightly defend, although they just stay quiet, kind of. Not that the church was at ease with itself either, because the church kind of contains these two views. Because there are priests who are they like Aristotle a lot, and they would like some authority and knowledge, but yet
because it brings them power and money.
Maybe, yeah. But also, maybe they just believe human reason. Well, maybe it can achieve some things. They might think that Pope's view is a little bit too far, right? So that's a discussion within the church, but neither of them defended the Copernican style mathematical physics. I was just going to say, so for Descartes, that one of his most clever ideas is, what if I could show that the method that is used in mathematical physics can also be used to prove God's existence, that the soul is immortal, that, all these basic religious dogmas. If it could do that, and I could show that, then maybe the church would start to change their mind. They would like my natural philosophy. And they would give up Aristotle, right? Because Aristotle is inconsistent. But if I said it's not necessary that metaphysics and human reason disagree with some of the basic tenets of the Christian church? What if it supports them? This was part of his idea. That's a radical, very radical idea, right? Program. And it partially worked, it partially didn't work. Okay, so back to the text. Those three positions we see here, and that was the preface, right? Then next comes, and this is where we start hearing the voice of Copernicus himself, right, at this line. He too wrote a letter, kind of a different style and a different strategy to try to keep his work from being condemned, right? And what we see in this letter generally is, so it's written directly to the Pope, very common in this period to write to the authority who you're most worried about, and to buddy up to them, right? It's clearly he doesn't think that the church will have a problem with his theory. He thinks some people in the church might stir up trouble, but it seems his main purpose here is to, well, he thinks there are always people who are idiots and they attack anything new and interesting. And they try to, make it look worse than it is. And he's telling the Pope personally, those people are idiots. They're always around. Don't worry about what they say. They're going to paint me as a radical who wanted to change everything and wanted to become famous through new ideas and wanted to sell books. I just want to tell you my real reasons for publishing this book. All right? I published this book reluctantly, and he'll explain. So he's going to go through this and explain, and how he doesn't think that, he actually thinks at the end that this book will contribute to the church. It will be a good thing for the church, not a bad thing. So he has no idea. He's very naive in a certain sense in this letter. So he says, he tells the Pope, Holy Father, many of you've probably heard of my theories. His theories were well known throughout Europe, although he hadn't published them. Not to the common public, but within the church, there were astronomers, there were people he worked with. Everybody knew Copernicus was the great authority, right? Astronomers were quite well known. They would be people that, just like doctors. Now doctors aren't as well known. Like, is your doctor famous? But in the medieval period and the modern period, doctors could become extremely famous and extremely wealthy if it got around that they were, if you're sick and you're the King of England, you want the best in the world. You talk to all your friends, they say, well, this guy in Italy cured me. And you go and you happen to accidentally cure the King of England of his problem, and you're set. Everybody wants you as the personal physician. Same thing with astronomers. Astronomers made calendars. That was one of their main functions. Most astronomers did astrology on the side. Some of them believed in it. Some of them did not. Most of them probably did not. But it's a good way to make money off stupid rich people, right? Why not? You need money, you need patrons. You can do your real work on the side. So people like Copernicus, people wanted to know about them, even in the church. The church believed, the Pope probably had he shouldn't, but he had his interest in astrology too. The popes were not like, even though we've given this kind of view of the Pope of like reason being whatever, that's only the view of one Pope at the time of Copernicus and Galileo, right? Actually more of Galileo. And it's kind of the official Pope position. But the popes were people. So in the Renaissance, one of the popes murdered lots of people, right? And he was a rich, the Medici, some of them became popes. They were the wealthiest banking family in Europe. The Pope, being Pope, was a political position for the most part. So many of them probably didn't even really believe the official Pope position. That wasn't necessary. Some of them did, some of them didn't. Same here, right? So the popes would be interested in, just as other human beings are, in knowing how they're going to die and whatnot. But they would also be interested in any kind of rumors about genius astronomers or whatever. So this certainly got around. He knew that the Pope knew who he was. He wasn't someone who he probably had intermediaries who had talked to the Pope before, his friends who we'll mention later. They would have known and met with the Pope and told them and communicated between them. So it's not like he's never communicated in any way with the church. He certainly has. But here he's kind of writing face to face with the Pope. So he says, so I'm aware that philosophers' ideas are not subject to ordinary persons, because it is his endeavor, the philosopher. Now notice he's referring to himself as a philosopher, not as an astronomer here, right? So he does think of himself as an astronomer, but we can already have a sense here that he thinks of astronomy as more philosophical, right? More scientific, in other words. We'll see this later, right? Philosophers' ideas are not subject to the judgment of ordinary persons because it is his endeavor to seek truth in all things. How could that preface of Osiander be Copernicus? He just says right here, he's seeking truth, right?
Yeah. So I was going to tell you about this, and like the preface is, he's apologizing all the time about we're not trying to get to the truth and whatever, and then Copernicus is like, "Yep, my hypotheses work. It's true.
True. I'm a philosopher. I'm giving explanations. Everything. Yeah, this shows you how, and this tricked the church for 100 years. I mean, they weren't the brightest, bunch as far as it comes to reading astronomical textbooks. So there was a hand up. Mohammed, do you have your hand up again?
Yes. Yes. So according to him, was being did he identify as an astronomer to begin with? Because I see that he contradicted himself in the beginning and then said that he identified as an astronomer, but he thought that astronomy was a branch of natural philosophy. Because it's a bit confusing because he contradicts himself sometimes.
Well, I mean, the preface by Osiander is not Copernicus. That holds a strong distinction between astronomy and philosophy. But it seems quite clear that Copernicus doesn't hold that view, right? Because he switches back and forth. Soon he'll talk about himself as an astronomer, here as a philosopher. He's saying philosophy in general, and then he talks about astronomy as if astronomy is just part of natural philosophy, giving explanations, right?
Thank you.
They are not subject to other persons because he seeks truth in all things to the extent permitted to the human reason by God. So ordinary persons, this is not the contemporary world you and I live in. There's a bit of contempt here for ordinary people. They're not experts, right? The philosopher is not answerable to common people because they're not. This is that title. No one enter here who doesn't know geometry, right at the beginning of the book. And his worry is it's those common people that are going to influence the Pope's views. He wants astronomers, people who know what he is talking about, to be the ones. Yet I hold that completely erroneous views should be shunned. So he doesn't want erroneous views. Those who know that the consensus of many centuries has sanctioned the conception that the earth remains at rest in the middle of the heavens as its center would, I reflected, regard it as an insane pronouncement if I had made the opposite assertion that the earth moves. So he's saying he realized this was an insane idea, right? Not only common people, but just about anyone, because the consensus of centuries, right? That centuries, thousands of years, in fact, people have held this view as the main view. To say otherwise would be thought to be insane. He knows that. I know this. So let me explain the reasons how I came to this insane position as the only sane position, right? The only possible position. Not because I wanted insanity, but because I was driven there by good, noble motives, right? That everyone should have. So he debated, should he do this? Should he publish it? Or should he keep it a secret, right? And now he's saying, should I have published it? I debated, should I keep it a secret or publish it? And most of his life, he kept it more or less a secret, right? He only published it on his deathbed at the urging of others. He decided finally that he should publish it, and his worry was that it would be lost, right? And this benefit to mankind would be lost. His ideas should, and he explains that he didn't want to, he wasn't keeping it a secret for the same reason that many people kept scientific theories secret, which was because he was jealous that other people would have his knowledge, right? That's not his reason for keeping it secret, which was a very common thing at the time. People who discovered important things would often immediately hide them and try to use them for purposes, because if you tell everyone about it, it loses value, right? If you can, yeah?
But you used to hide things because you were afraid from the Catholic Church. No, wasn't it? That was the main reason before? Because the signs of creativity and whatnot is...
Well, I would say it's complicated. It changed throughout time. I think at certain points, I think it depends on what kind of discovery it was. If it was like a mechanical discovery, or it was something very benign, not about the structure of the universe itself, it was something like optics, the tendency was still to hide it, but not because of the danger of the church, but because knowledge is power. Right? You are the genius who has the secret. This was even true of mathematics. The person who discovered, you know, you all know the what is it called? The quadratic formula, right? You know, the solution, the way to solve any equation of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. You get a formula for it. They were trying to do that for all equations of all orders, you know, x to the 1, x to the 2, x to the 3, x to the 4, x to the... Once you get to like x to the 4, it gets really complicated. X to the 5 is nearly impossible. And then you get past that and it does become impossible to come up with a formula that gives you all of the roots, right? Now, the person who solved the quintic, the quintic, that's the 5, right?
Power, yeah.
Kept it a secret. It was published by another guy later, and then the guy was like, hey, you stole it. I told you about it. You should have never published it, because he wanted to be the guy who had the solution and could solve all those equations if you asked him to. You send him an equation, he'll solve it. But how he solved it, you're not going to get that, right? Because you, as soon as he tells everyone, it's like, I just lost all that work, right? Becomes public. Notice in this period, there's no like, you don't do science for the public's good.
Right? So you do it for your own glory?
You do it for what?
For your own glory.
For your own glory, for your own intellectual interest, for your own, fame, and maybe to make a living, right? Yeah. Same thing with doctors and so on. They didn't publish their remedies because then you start curing people.
Yeah, so
other people start curing people, and now suddenly the King of England can hire anyone who read your book, right? Not good.
Right.
So anyways, but so Copernicus is saying here, that's not his mindset. He really is just like, he wants to benefit the church and mankind. He's not interested in himself. He's not selfish. This is not why I kept it secret. Yeah?
Isn't it that a way to be on the good side of the church, to justify his work?
Sure. It's not selfish. Just doing it, you know. And you say, well, okay, then if the church says, we don't like what you're doing, then he can say, oh, well, okay, I was trying to do a good thing. Don't blame me, right? I take it back, whatever.
But he's going to die anyway, so I don't think he cared.
Yeah, well, he didn't know it probably at that moment. Anyways, so then he goes on to say, well, it's not only that, but the only reason I really eventually brought it out was because there was so much pressure on me from people in the church itself, right? So Nicholas Schoenberg, the Cardinal of Capua, right? Tiedemann Gysa, the Bishop of Chelmno, and so on. These were people who urged me, who you know very well, who are your friends, dear Pope, who urged me to publish this. So I'm innocent. I'm just trying to satisfy them. They exhorted me to no longer refuse on account of the fear I felt. They said, don't fear, to make my work available for the general use of students of astronomy, all right? The crazier my doctrine of the Earth's motion now appeared to most people, the argument ran, the so much more admiration and thanks would it gain, right? You helped us all see the truth, right? That's what they're telling him. When they saw the publication of my writings, dispel the fog of absurdity by the most luminous proofs, right? Illuminating, shed light on everything, right? Now, that's kind of the social circumstance that led him to publish and his general motives. Now in the next section, he goes into the actual scientific motives that led him not to publish, but to adopt the theory that he has in the first place, right? So this is gets a little more complicated here, some of the terminology. So he says, this is his introduction, I was impelled to consider a different system of deducing the motions of the universe's spheres for no other reason than the realization that astronomers do not agree among themselves in their investigations of the subject. So there is no consensus among astronomers themselves. That's a very general statement. He's saying we have no theory. We have theories. That's not satisfactory. There's one truth. There should be one theory. So I tried that. And here's the problem. Here's the disagreements. Does someone want to, so there are two groups of people that disagree. The problem is not only do they disagree, but each one of them in their own ways fails, and each is justified in disagreeing with the other. So he's going to paint here a true dilemma. It's not like everyone disagrees, but one is probably right. They all have flaws that are obvious and unavoidable, right? Here are these. So what are these two? Does someone want to read for in the first place? Begin reading here.
I can read.
I'll read.
Who said first?
Go ahead.
Nurhan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the next part,
For-
the other person can read. Okay, go ahead.
Sir, you want me to read the 4 in the first place?
4 in the
This
first
part?
place. Yeah.
Okay. For in the first place, they are so uncertain about the motion of the sun and the moon, and they cannot establish and observe a constant length even for a tropical year.
Okay, so
Secondly,
stop.
Okay.
So this is just, so there's two ways. We're going to get the two groups in a minute under 1 and 2. A and B are kind of the two main problems that no one can solve. And then 1 and 2 are the two different theories and what the problems are with them. That's according to my structure here. You just said A on my structure here, which is a calendar issue, right? Calendars are very important. They were much more important then than, well, they're important now, but we've more or less got a calendar that works. But amazingly, it's very, very hard. You all can look up some YouTube video. It's quite interesting. And all the calendars of the past and why we have leap days and all this weird stuff. It seems like it should be an easy thing, but it's not easy. There's two different definitions of the year, right? One has to do with the stars and one has to do with the Earth's motion. You have to decide which of those to use. And those aren't perfectly regular. And it's just a mess, really. Back when Copernicus was working, the calendar was still terrible. Like if you were living in 1600 and say, let's just assume July was in the summer as it is now, and you went back 1,000 years, July was like in the middle of the winter. Like the months and the seasons didn't line up.
Okay.
So this is a problem, you know, and like, what do you do with Christmas? How do you celebrate holidays? When it's gotta be right? We should be celebrating the birth of Christ, if you're in the Christian church, on the day that is the same day of the year that Christ was born. How do you keep track of that? If December, 25th is a different day every year, it's the same number, same month, but it actually is a different day every year during that time. How would that work? So keeping track of religious holidays, which are not just a matter of convenience, but have to do with, you know, I don't think Jesus would be too happy if you celebrate his birthday on the wrong day, right? You get it all wrong. This is not going to work. If you celebrate Easter and this is the day that he was, you know, didn't rise, that would be a problem, right? So these things were immensely important, and they were immensely complicated and unsolved at the time. How to do these years. Still, this was still true into the 18th century, and it's still true today. Our calendars are still somewhat arbitrary, right? We have the leap days every 4 years, but like someone could look it up, like every 70 some years, we have to add another day or something. Like it's not even, or maybe it's 100 and some years or something. There's like a leap day in the year that's extra, and so on. If you want to think about, it's not true of the Catholic Church anymore, but the Islamic Church is quite interesting, right, in this way, because it still relies a lot on astronomy, does it not? You don't have that experience maybe in Lebanon as much. How do they do it in Lebanon? So when I lived in Egypt, you know, when the holiday was going to begin depended on an announcement by authorities based upon observation.
Yeah, we still have that.
You have
We
that
still
in
have
Lebanon?
that for Ramadan, when
Yeah.
you're going like to Eid, to know when Eid, like when you stop fasting and go into Eid, there's like several different authorities, and there's one guy that always gets it wrong, and it's like always such a mess. It's like, today we stop fasting, and then they look at the moon again, and they go like,
And they're
"Nope,
like,
we should have fasted that. It's every year, every year."
But I don't know why it is, but in Egypt, like for the university, right?
because
We'd
they
have- go ahead.
because of كلية إنه they have a very important university for studying religion.
Yeah.
There, and they are in the Arab world one of the most prominent teachers of like Islamic religion. So that's why they have this big authority there, and they always get things right, and everyone refers to the Azhar, Jama al-Azhar.
Yeah.
For,
They also depend on it,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So here I've never had a holiday. I can't remember a holiday changing the night that it was supposed to start, them saying, well, it's not going to be tomorrow. But in Egypt, that happened all the time, right?
Yeah, no, it happens here too.
Yeah? I can't. Maybe a little bit, but not as much.
Yeah, it's not as talked about.
Yeah. There was a hand up.
Yes, but don't you think that like these holidays were created because everyone wanted to center everything around their religion? So, I mean, in their time, religion corresponded to power and authority. So, like, they were free to do whatever they like, so that everything is consistent with their view, which is given to them.
Sure, the holidays. But the holidays, I mean, according to the church, the holidays are fixed not by what the church wanted, but by, you know, when Jesus actually was born and so on and so forth, right? So there's an objective kind of measure that you need astronomers to do, right?
So they accepted science at one point.
Well, I wouldn't call it science so much as they accepted. They looked on astronomers like they would someone who knows Latin, right?
It was human reasoning.
Yeah, but only as an instrument, only like to report, not to change the theory or
yeah,
whatever.
So they accepted at one point.
Yeah. No, sure. They always had astronomers to like look at stuff, look at the moon, look at the stars, make calendars, but not to create theories of explaining why the world works the way it does. Yeah.
They cherry picked whatever works for them, basically.
Yeah, of course. So would you go on, Nuran? Secondly,
Secondly, in determining the motions, not only of these bodies, but also of the other 5 planets, they do not use the same principles, assumptions, and explanations of the apparent revolutions and motions.
Okay, stop
For while some employ only, okay.
So B, this is the one that gets broken down into 2 parts, right? So they don't use the same principles, assumptions, and explanations. They have different theories, in other words, right? Different theories of the universe. The other person who wanted to read, you want to start here at for while?
Okay. For while some employ only homocentrics, others utilize eccentrics and epicycles, and yet they do not quite reach their goal.
Okay, stop there. So we got two groups, right? Some employ homocentrics. Who are those? What is a homocentric?
I think that means the Earth is in the center.
And we have one center of where
Yeah.
everything revolves, around
So-
which everything revolves.
So there's, if it were the Earth, by definition, then it would be geocentric.
Mhm.
This is homocentric, as Nurhan has it. It's same center, right? This is the Aristotelian model. Everything rotates around the same center, and the center is the center. The Earth is at the center. It's so as he doesn't say geocentrism. That's not the problem. It's the use of all the circles rotating uniformly around the same center. That's one group, under which fall Aristotelians and probably some others, right? Doesn't say what that center is. Could be the Earth at the center, or the sun at the center. Could be, as long as it was all homocentrics. Everything was centered on it. But generally, we're talking about it is also geocentric. So that's one group, great. And they're going to be, the problem with them is going to be clear here, right, under 1. The second one, those who utilize eccentrics, they use eccentrics. That's meaning the Earth or whatever is not at the center of the orbit, right? We saw that. And epicycles. So who is he talking about here?
Ptolemy's model of the universe.
Ptolemy primarily, but also all the Arab astronomers, all the Arab astronomers who followed Ptolemy. And yet they do not quite reach their goal. So neither group reaches their goal. They both fail. So it's not just they disagree, they both fail. All the parties fail in the main things. But here's what they fail. They fail for different contrasting reasons. For although those who put their faith in homocentrics showed that some non-uniform motions, namely the retrograde motions, right, planets going back and forth in the sky, could be compounded in this way, could be constructed using homocentrics. And they did this in a very complicated way. Because how do you get things to move backwards when everything is circular moving around the center? Well, it had to be with like, these spheres had to interact with each other, and it was messy. So although they could account for some, but not the vast majority of the non-uniform motions. By this way, they were unable to obtain any incontrovertible result in absolute agreement with the phenomenon. Simply put, those who used homocentrics could not fit the data that we find in the sky. They just couldn't. Meaning for Copernicus, fitting the data is a criterion of truth, right? Not surprisingly. You got to fit the data at the very least. So he was an empiricist, right? He believed in data. This just wasn't his main idea. Who was reading before? You want to continue it on the other hand? Was that Lynn or?
Yeah.
On the other hand.
On the other hand, those devised the eccentric seem thereby in large measure to have solved the problems of the apparent motions with appropriate calculations.
Okay, stop. So the Ptolemaic and Arab astronomers, they fit the data, right? That's what he's saying. They fit the data. Good, they solved that problem. Okay, continue.
But meanwhile, they introduced a good many ideas which apparently contradict the first principles of uniform motion.
Okay, stop there. What is that? What is that saying? What is this? So those who used eccentrics fit the data, but
I think there are two ideas here. We can talk about the speed of like the moon, how it's no longer at a constant speed because
Yeah.
the Earth is no longer at the center. And we can talk about like how the epicycles, like that's not uniform, like it's
Yeah.
different every time.
So when he refers to the first principles of uniform motion, he's talking about the Aristotelian principles of motion, one of which is the uniform rotation around a central point. So this is interesting, right? Why did Copernicus adopt his theory? Because on the one hand, the Aristotelians could not fit the data, and on the other hand, the Ptolemaics couldn't fit Aristotle. And this is why he was forced to look for a new theory, right? They both disagreed in ways that couldn't be made consistent. So something, they must share, in other words, some mistaken assumption, both of them, right? So you got to find something entirely new. This is not usually how Copernicus is presented in modern science textbooks or on Wikipedia or whatever, right? This doesn't sound like the great revolutionary who's looking to overthrow all previous thought. It sounds like a scientist who is deeply embedded in his own intellectual world and is trying to make sense of it, and is Aristotelian, just as everyone was in some respect, because Aristotle was science, right? And it was just the confusion that led him unexpectedly to move beyond something he would rather have not. He would have rather Aristotle's theory worked. Just data didn't let him, right? He's got these commitments and he can't make them consistent, so he's driven to something revolutionary reluctantly, right? So now here's the biggest, this is this becomes very interesting suddenly. Those are interesting things, but now there's a third problem which primarily applies to the Ptolemaic model. And he probably his target is more the Ptolemaic model than the Aristotelian model, because not many people who are astronomers defended the Aristotelian model anymore. It was so obviously inadequate. Ptolemy's model was the model, right? And so beyond its violation of Aristotle, that's kind of a particular thing. Like the Arab philosophers, they too didn't like the Ptolemaic model because it's a violation of Aristotle. Many astronomers were bugged by that. But that's not enough to really say anything for the church, right? Or anyone else, because maybe Aristotle just happens to be wrong about some of these things. So maybe there's a deeper reason, and that alone wouldn't have led Copernicus to where he was. So here he starts a deeper reason. He says, nor could they, this is the Ptolemaics, right, elicit or deduce from the eccentrics the principal consideration. So something, the most important thing they could not get from their theory. Well, what is that? It's going to take us a while to figure that out. That is the true structure of the universe and the true symmetry of its parts. So the claim here we need to try to understand is he's saying the Ptolemaic system lacks structure and symmetry of a system, of a true system. I say that that's not obvious, is it?
I think he might be referring to the fact that some planets move in spirals, others move in circles, and I think that's what he had a problem maybe with.
Well,
And I think it was also the stars, right? Like
Yeah.
in reference to the stars, like they didn't move properly or something. I remember something like that.
Well, let me push back a little bit and say, when you and I look at, if you were to freshly look at the Copernican model, put it up on your wall, you put the Ptolemaic model up on your wall, and you look at the Ptolemaic model, something in it tells me it looks almost more systematic. It's beautiful, right?
Yeah, it does.
Looks
It does.
like the flower, you know, it's very symmetrical. This is the symmetry of the parts. It's, you know, you could almost say, well, yes, this, you could maybe think of, maybe your God is the kind of God, you know, he likes flowers, likes beautiful, ornate things. Now, that wasn't the ancient idea of God. That wasn't the ancient idea of, or the medieval idea of God. God was not complicated, didn't like complicated things. God works in simple, straightforward ways. The more divine something is, the more simple it is. The more uniform, the more constant, right? The idea we have now of like, maybe a sign of God is like mystery and complexity and things like that. That's actually much later in human history, we'll see. That's part of Romanticism and so on. We'll see that later in this text too. Now, the ancient model of God is just a very, you know, straightforward, simple, orderly designed thing. So they wouldn't necessarily look at the Ptolemaic model. They might look at it and say, yeah, this is just too flowery for God, right? But he doesn't really say that here. It's something about system and the structure. This took me a long time to figure out myself, right? You got to read a lot very carefully and kind of imagine your way into Copernicus, and then you'll see what's going on here. Here he gives us a little more of a clue in this next passage. He says, on the contrary, so far from them having a system, this is how he views it. He gives us a nice, important, and historically significant metaphor. He says their experience, or actually it's a simile, just like someone taking from various places, hands, feet, a head, and other pieces, very well depicted individually, right? Beautiful hands, beautiful feet, beautiful torso, and so on, but not for the representation of a single person. So you compare the hands to the feet, the hands are too big, the feet are too small, the skin color is not quite the same, so on and so forth. They don't look like they fit on the same body, right? Though individually beautiful. Since these fragments would not belong to one another at all, a monster rather than a man would be put together from them, right? This is very nice, very historically significant. All of you have heard of, if not read, you know, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. That's from the end of the period we address in this course. Here, the idea is not so far from Aristotle, which is that, to put it in a funny way, nature should be natural. Nature, by natural, we mean nature should be wholesome and smooth and continuous and beautiful and orderly and simple. What is complicated and messy, that's human work, right? Artificial stuff. You can see, if you try to make a flower, it's gonna be garbage. It's gonna be ugly. Try it, right? Genetically try to engineer a flower. It's gonna look all nasty, you know? Probably won't look like a flower at all. That's man's work. Nature is beautiful and orderly and designed and simple, right? I put this as saying nature should look natural. Should look like nature should look. It shouldn't look like a monster. A monster is not, according to the traditional view, monsters, ugly things only come about when people have sinned, people have interfered, and so on. Nature produces beautiful things. And so the Ptolemaic universe doesn't look natural. It doesn't look orderly in this sense. We still don't know what that sense is. That's still a bit of a mystery here. But at least we know that he's using this comparison. His is natural, theirs is like a monster. Also, we can see that as a monster, it's a bad thing. He's using this as a criterion of truth, which is weird. Saying it's not looking natural indicates to me that it cannot be true. It just cannot be. It should look natural. We don't think that anymore. Well, we kind of think that, we kind of don't think that, right? There was a major shift in human thinking. Let me call on those in just 1 second, the 2 hands that are up. There was, so like when Frankenstein was written, notice in that book, there's this idea that there's a fascination with the monstrous, with the mystery of nature, and that maybe nature has monstrous things in it, and maybe the monstrous can teach us about ourselves, right? The idea of the Frankenstein monster is supposed to teach human beings about human nature, right? Romanticism in particular saw nature, maybe human things, as the most adequate expression of nature. Nature is chaotic. Nature is complex. The idea that genius and intelligence could be present, could be something that's bizarre, shocking, above our heads, right? That's what intelligence might be, that it might be impossible for normal people to understand the truth of things. This is a modern romantic idea. It's not the idea of Copernicus's time. If it's simple, if it's true, it should be simple and orderly and easy to understand. And the more true it is, the easier it should be to understand. The less mysterious it should be.
Sir,
Less
but
monstrous. Yeah.
I remember like at some point I read, I can't remember if it's in Copernicus's introduction or in the one by Osiander, that the hypothesis he's about to explain is perplexing. Yeah. And like he admits that it's also like complicated, just like Ptolemy.
So that's a good point. But so there's another layer to this, which is that to the ignorant, everything is complex, right? To the ignorant, everything is complicated. But to the astronomer, to the mathematician, this is the simplest theory, right? So it's not like, the point is that it's not that intelligence and truth is intrinsically complex. It may be far from the common person, but that's because we are complex, because we have desires and confused minds and so on and so forth. So even Aristotle, so the truth is what God thinks, and what God thinks should be the easiest thing. Because God doesn't need any effort, and it's perfect and simple and all this stuff. But overcoming our own deficiencies might be immensely difficult, impossible, right? So that's the difference. Truth is intrinsically simple. It is the most knowable. And Aristotle even has this idea, the more you know the truth, the easier it becomes, until you become kind of like a self-perpetuating thinking thing, which is most like God, which is thought thinking itself, in the utmost ease and relaxation, right? The more you think, the easier thinking becomes. There was a hand, I think we're out of time, maybe that's what the hand is about.
No, you already passed the point when you were talking about Copernicus thinking that anything like nature has to be natural and has to be smooth and systematic.
Yeah.
I was just contradicting that, like I was saying, and no, I think that nature has to be more random than anything. Like you can't really guess what nature is gonna do. So that's all I was gonna say. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a post-Copernican, even post. So that is a view that during the Romantic period, like in the 1840s, this is when people, even in philosophy and science, become they go even farther than we, right? Like they start to think of nature as like they become obsessed with the monstrous and the complex and the mysterious and the almost what we would call magical again, right? This is when like homeopathy becomes one of these, like that was born at this period. Like maybe using special substances again can heal you, and things have special powers that are beyond what modern science could tell us about them. and these kinds of things, right? So that went very far. We've drawn back from that a little bit, but we took that lesson, right? That the universe is always more complicated than we might think. On the other hand, it's always simpler than we think, right? And there's kind of a back and forth between these two ideas. But we can never predict it. That seems to be the case, right? It always is surprising. That is not the view of the modern period. They kind of think once Copernicus kind of showed the general way, it should all just kind of smoothly follow. And it was the fact that didn't happen that led to that romantic period and that wonder that maybe it's not what we all thought it was. It's not so simple, and so on. Other things we need to go. The time is up. Do finish the Copernicus reading for Thursday. I'm gonna try to get through it, but we're a little behind my other section. Don't catch Corona. In the meantime, any questions? Or else I'm gonna close.
No, thank you.
So we don't start with Bruno's video.
No, I will. In about an hour or two, I'll fix the schedule. You don't need to start with Bruno yet.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay. Bye bye.
Out of curiosity,
Excuse me.
I just want to ask one more thing.
Sure.
So if I volunteered last time, I can't volunteer today, right?
You can volunteer unless I say no.
I mean, I'm talking anyway because
Yeah.
I enjoy discussing.
Yeah, sure. I wrote you down.
Because I already did last week, so I just wanted to
Okay.
give a chance for other people today. That's why I didn't volunteer. But for me, I don't think it's a big issue to say I volunteer because I'm
Okay.
always.
No problem. Nothing to worry about. And also, if you're usually if
No.
you're participating, and you didn't say you were going to participate, I often just write people down anyways because I see they're participating, although they didn't volunteer. So it's, unless I say no, that's it, close it off, no one else, then don't worry about it. Okay?
Can I start with Bruno anyway in the weekend? Just for
Yeah,
fun?
absolutely.
Okay, cool.
You can read everything that Bruno wrote in Italian if you want.
I don't know Italian.
It's Renaissance Italian too. It's not easy.
Even worse.
I would like to do that one day, but I never will. All right. See you on Thursday.
See you.